Hello everyone and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shuboale. We begin with recent developments in Sudan. Now, the military ruler, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, says internet services in the country will be restored in phases when the military feels the media is telling the truth. He was highlighting continued threats to media freedom and accessibility following the October 25th army takeover. The country has been under an internet blackout since the coup. Internet Freedom Monitor NetBlock says the outage persists since the service cut was reported following the coup. People have been relying on local media reporting on developments, including protests that broke out following the coup, but that has been limited. Online mobilization has remained crucial to drawing attention to public anger over the coup, but it's not clear how some are sharing messages online given the internet outage. In the meantime, rights groups and activists across the country are calling and planning for huge protests against the military takeover. Protests are continuing despite military presence on major streets as more people join both in the capital and in other cities. Activists say they will continue to fight for democracy despite the anger they face from the security forces. For now, shops, banks and other businesses are closed as part of a protest movement demanding a return to civilian rule. The health ministry official says at least 7 protesters have been killed since the coup. And now that he's back in his residence in Khartoum, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok has been receiving high-profile visitors, some of whom are ambassadors from the UK, the EU, Germany, France and the UN. The United Nations Integrated Transition Mission in Sudan talked about the visit via social media, saying Hamdok was found to be in good health, but it continued to call for full restoration of his liberty. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says he has spoken to Foreign Minister Mariam Sadiq Al-Mahdi to condemn the arrest of civilian leaders. He also says both discussed how the U.S. could support the Sudanese people's call for a return to civilian democracy. Staying with international reactions to the coup in Sudan, the UN Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa says Monday's military takeover was a tragic event for the country. Bafat Onanga Anyaga was making the comments to the Security Council. He said the coup highlighted the fragility of some African governments. Sudan's Minister of Finance on Monday described the new military arrangement as a new reality that the nation must work with in order to succeed, and that at the end, a civilian prime minister who will appoint the government will have to be appointed. And away from Sudan, over in neighboring South Sudan, many have been displaced by ongoing armed attacks in Tambura. The situation is so concerning, the United Nations is calling for parties to reduce the tensions.
While the United Nations mission in South Sudan has established a temporary base here to restore calm and reduce tensions, the widespread damage to property and disruption of cellular networks means that community members have little recourse to connect with missing relatives. The volatile security situation also nullifies any hope for communities to organize their own search parties. However, thanks to ongoing efforts by UN MIS and partners, many people who were abducted have been released.
It was dark when I was kidnapped by the armed men. We were locked in a room and tied up. There were 2 of us together, and they told us that today is our last day on earth, so we should be ready to die.
To prevent newly displaced people from being abducted while gathering food or water, UN MIS peacekeepers stationed here are stepping up patrols and providing escorts for water collection. But the experience of being forcibly taken and detained remains a harrowing one for abductees.
I thank God for what He has done, because I never thought I would walk out alive. We were not allowed to go out of the room. We were detained in, and we were not given food for 2 days. It was only on the 3rd day that we were given some food and water.
Displaced people are struggling to survive after months of protracted conflict that has destroyed livelihoods, forced them from their homes, and created a huge healthcare and educational vacuum.
What I can say is that we need to stay where UNMISS has placed us. We should not move anywhere because the security around us is bad. At least the UN is there to protect us.
UNMISS is engaging with all stakeholders to mitigate the effects of ongoing violence and protect civilians.
And over in South Africa, authorities will deploy 10,000 soldiers to assist in security operations during the forthcoming municipal elections due to start next week. The South African Parliament noted on Wednesday that President Cyril Ramaphosa had authorized the military deployment to help the police ensure a safe and secure environment during the polls. South Africans will be turning out on Monday to elect their municipal councillors and mayors. The elections are seen as a test to the popularity of the ruling ANC party following the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma over corruption charges. The military deployment will begin on Saturday and will last for 5 days until the 3rd of November. Our correspondent in South Africa, Brian Pugeni, joins us now from Johannesburg. Brian, 10,000 soldiers is a lot. How concerning is security across the country as we approach the elections?
Thank you for having me, Tenny. Well, it's very concerning at the moment. Like you rightly say, 10,000 soldiers will be deployed from Saturday up until the 3rd of November. Just after the voting starts coming in. The Minister of Police on Tuesday held a media briefing saying there are 300 hotspots they've identified in the country in 4 major provinces, that's Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal, where we've seen even councillors, people who are candidates being murdered in those provinces, especially in KwaZulu-Natal. So it's a major concern at the moment. That's why the army is stepping in to help the South Africa Police Services in the build-up and a few days after the elections have been conducted.
I know the elections are seen as a sort of popularity test for the ruling ANC, especially since former President Jacob Zuma's jailing over corruption charges. But has there ever been a time the ANC's popularity dwindled so much their position was jeopardized?
Well, the ANC has been under a lot of scrutiny, not just because of the Jacob Zuma corruption case, but so many corruption cases within the party themselves. We've seen senior government officials, ministers who've been identified in corruption cases over the past year in the PPE scandals. Minister in the health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize was one of those. The presidential spokesperson was also one of those. So it's not just President Jacob Zuma's corruption case, but a lot of the ANC members who've been corrupt and been identified. So it's really been bad for the ANC. Even divisions in the party have been at an all-time high. We've seen factions in the ANC which we've not seen before. And there's a lack of new ideas, which people have been saying the ANC is lacking new ideas, busy putting in old candidates, and they've not been praised for putting in the youth in their candidates list. So the ANC's popularity is really dwindling, and this is like an all-time high.
And just talk to us about the municipal election's strategic importance to the country's politics.
Well, the municipal elections are very important in the country's politics at the moment. Seeing that because they're the general local government elections, we're going to see candidates engaging the communities, which is very important, knowing your community and what is needed. And at the moment, service delivery, we've been seeing a lot of areas where the service delivery has been poor, especially in the locations, in places like Soweto, Khayelitsha, and Cape Town, people not having electricity, not having water, running water, sewage all over the place. So the candidates have to go out there, be with the people, be one with the people. But there have been reports as well where we've had candidates who are not from those certain areas, and residents have not been happy about that, saying, how do you put a candidate who does not understand our frustrations and our challenges, our daily challenges? So the main thing is for the candidates to connect with the people and then once you have that connection, you can talk to them, then service delivery comes naturally.
And Brian, just on a final note before I let you go, who are the key candidates to look out for this year?
Well, the main one will be the former mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba, who is now has his own party. So he's one of the main guys we probably are looking at the moment, because Johannesburg is one of the most contested areas. So he's vying for that mayorship. We're seeing a few young candidates as well, which is very interesting. We've got Siamo Magunye, who will be turning 18 just a few days after the elections. So it's very nice to see these young people. We've got the NC's youngest candidate as well, Christian Castan, who is 20. So it's really nice to see these young people who are coming up with new ideas, who are saying that they understand what the youth needs. We're seeing that the youth unemployment in the country is at an all-time high. So it's really good to see these young people coming in and saying they'll deliver and they understand what the young people want.
All right, Brian, a lot to look forward to. Thank you so much for the update. And now, the World Health Organization says more women have reported alleged sexual exploitation and abuse by aid workers during a widening 2018-2020 scandal in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The WHO has issued an action plan to address the allegations that occurred during a recent Ebola outbreak.
83 aid workers, a quarter of them employed by the WHO, were involved in sexual coercion and abuse during the country's massive 10th Ebola epidemic, an independent commission already said last month. Its report cited 9 allegations of rape. The youngest victim, a 14-year-old girl who accused a WHO driver of offering her a ride and raping her. She later gave birth to his child.
I think we're in a very important but fragile place. I think the Independent Commission's report and the testimonies of victims and survivors is a message to all agencies, not just WHO, that something is wrong with the system. There are a number of rape allegations which are definitely criminal in nature.
WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus took a radically different approach in the UN by launching the independent probe, and WHO has already terminated the contract of 4 staff identified as perpetrators. The Geneva-based agency has already said it will investigate potentially negligence by managers that may amount to misconduct. The Independent Commission's probe was prompted by an investigation last year by the Thomson Reuters Foundation and the New Humanitarian, in which more than 50 women accused aid workers from the WHO and other charities of demanding sex in exchange for jobs between 2018 and 2020.
But it's also important to note that we will hand over all 83 case files to the UN investigation services because there could be alleged perpetrators that work for other UN agencies. So that is in process. We're discussing that, to hand all of the case files over to the UN investigation services.
Tedros has announced WHO is sending experts in preventing sexual abuse in its operations to 12 high-risk countries from Afghanistan to Congo and Ethiopia. Gemhewage says $30 million was earmarked over the next 2 years. Gemhewage, medical doctor from Sri Lanka, left her homeland 20 years ago after receiving personal threats while working with aid groups helping child victims of sexual abuse.
Rape allegations.
Ethiopia's Tigray crisis, intense fighting is reported to be continuing around the cities of Dessie and Kombolcha in Amara State between the Tigrayan rebels and the Ethiopian army with its allies. Dessie is home to tens of thousands of internally displaced people who fled their homes as the war expanded to Tigray's southern neighbor. Kombolcha, on the other hand, is an industrial hub home to the area's main airport. Meanwhile, airstrikes have once again been reported in the Tigrayan capital, Mekelle. The government's communications office said the targets were parts of Mesfin Engineering, an industrial plant that was also hit by airstrikes last week. And still in Ethiopia, textile manufacturers and workers in a factory that exports to the United States are concerned about the potential impact if the country is suspended from the African Growth and Opportunity Act. The agreement gives Ethiopia duty-free access to the U.S. The country has invested billions of dollars in the past decade to position itself as a light manufacturing hub on the African continent. Textile and apparel made up more than 90% of the goods exported duty-free into the U.S. last year.
Finoteselam Nigusi is a tailor in an Addis Ababa factory whose handiwork is her only source of livelihood, a job that could be in danger as the U.S. ponders whether to suspend her country's duty-free market status. The United States is reconsidering relations with Ethiopia over human rights abuse and a growing famine in the country's war-ravaged northern Tigray region.
I'll be seriously affected if this factory is forced to close. I send my child to a private school, so I paid the school fees and for the school bus. We live in a rented apartment, so we have to pay for rent too. If this company closes, I might be out of work for 4 to 5 months.
The suspension threatens Ethiopia's aspirations to become a light manufacturing hub and hard-won economic gains in a nation once a byword for famine and poverty. Washington has already laid the ground for sanctions. The U.S. government's chief trade representative says this month that Washington will make a decision soon on Ethiopia's status under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA.
We were able to create close to 200,000 direct jobs and millions of indirect jobs. So if AGOA is delisted, if there is a decision made to withdraw AGOA, it will have a direct impact on our effort to create more and better jobs for our citizens.
Over the past decade, Ethiopia's government has spent billions constructing a dozen industrial parks and related infrastructure. Some factories produce goods for U.S. brands such as U.S. fashion giant PVH, owner of Calvin Klein, Speedo, and Tommy Hilfiger labels. Jobs at risk include Finoteselam's and those of her 250 colleagues at a textile company.
A United Nations human rights expert has called for the removal of 20-year-old Western sanctions against Zimbabwe, saying they harmed jobs, health, and the poor. Alina Dewan said dialogue was the alternative way to achieve political reforms, a recommendation that echoes the African Union's stance. The US and the EU have said they won't remove sanctions until their demands for democratic reforms are met. Now, a Paris museum has handed back cultural artifacts that were looted from modern-day Benin during the colonial era, setting a precedent that will pressure other institutions to return stolen works. In a ceremony presided over by French President Emmanuel Macron, the Kwai-Brainly Museum returned to the Republic of Benin 26 artifacts that were stolen from the Kingdom of Abomey in 1892. They are among 5,000 works requested by the West African country. The handover marks a milestone in the years-long fight by African countries to recover works looted by Western explorers and colonizers at a time when numerous EU institutions are grappling with the cultural legacies of colonialism. Some 90% of Africa's cultural heritage is believed to be in Europe. French art historians estimate the Kwai-Brainly Museum in Paris alone holds some 70,000 African objects. And back here in Nigeria, participants at the 5th conference of the Network of African Parliamentarians on Defense and Security Committees in Abuja are expressing worry about what they describe as the weaponization of Africa. According to them, there has to be a paradigm shift in the interventions being provided by foreign countries to Africa.
Parliamentarians from across Africa in Nigeria for this conference on defense and security. The conversation here centers on how to tackle the security challenges on the continent and the need to assess the European Union-African Union cooperation.
Any territorial conflict within Europe.
Participants say there have to be more investments in youth empowerment and education as a panacea to the security challenges on the continent.
The money we are taking to import weapons are the very money that we need to transform our young people who are the victims. They are prone to violence because we talk about recruitment by terrorists, and these are the very young people that are vulnerable.
For the Nigerian parliamentarians, foreign organizations like the European Union should focus their intervention on providing technological support to African countries.
We don't need transfer of weapons, but we need transfer of technology that will build our defense. And these are areas that has opened us up to understand that areas that we can lobby with the international community, how they can assist Nigeria in addressing the issue of insecurity, identifying where the bandits are.
I also think that nations should come together. There should be government-to-government cooperations and collaborations in terms of security and intelligence gathering, where our borders will become more manned and better policed, so that we can check proliferation of light weapons and small arms, which has been on the increase also at the moment.
For the next 3 days, the conference is expected to come up with recommendations to combat the security challenges on the continent, and participating countries are expected to adopt these recommendations. Empress Simon, Channels Television News.
And on a lighter note, a community running an elephant orphanage in northern Kenya has found a cost-effective and nutritious way to feed baby elephants using goat's milk. After carefully balancing caloric content, protein and other nutrients, officials came up with a goat milk-based formula for elephants struggling to grow without their mother's milk.
In Samburu County, elephant calves rush across a dusty enclosure to take a gulp of milk, exposing their budding tusks as they open their small mouths to take in feeding bottles. The Reteti Elephant Sanctuary, located in the semi-arid scrublands of northern Kenya, is piloting goat milk for its small herd as a potential healthier and cheaper replacement nourishment than human baby formula. It is a solution that also puts money back into the pockets of the local community. The sanctuary has been using costly powdered baby milk to feed the calves, but Pauline Leerong, the facility's nutritionist, says they have started using goat milk-based formula as a potential replacement, especially for infant calves like 6-week-old Nkoberlengi, who they rescued recently.
The goat milk are very good for the survival and also the health of small calves.
Human baby formula are expensive, and switching to cheaper goat's milk could slash feeding costs for the sanctuary's heads, which fluctuates between 50 to 30 animals.
You find that goat's milk is very rich in protein, and not just protein, it's a very highly digestible protein. And like cow's milk, you find, yes, it's a little bit of a lower protein level, but again, it's not very easily digestible, and you end up having stomach upsets.
The sanctuary was founded in 2016 and helps to rescue orphaned and abandoned elephant calves. When the elephants are old enough to survive on their own, the sanctuary releases them back into the world.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale.